And hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong Cable. Chapters is the television show that profiles local authors, editors, and publishers in our community. I'm Eliot Parker, and it's great to have you with us. Our episode this week comes to you from Empire Books and News at Pullman Square in downtown Huntington. We are pleased to have Dr. Jim Gifford with us today from the Jesse Stuart Foundation, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Jesse Stuart Foundation and what its history, its role in the community today, and its functions as a book publisher. And we're delighted to have Dr. Gifford here today, and he is the CEO and senior editor of the Jesse Stuart Foundation, a nonprofit organization that was established in 1979 to manage Stuart's literary estate and to promote educational and cultural programs relevant to the late author's life and works. And from his Ashland office, Gifford directs activities that include republishing and marketing Stuart's out-of-print works, along with other books that focus on Kentucky and Appalachia. He also helps develop film and theater projects that focus on Stuart's works, cultivating new Stuart readers with programs for schools and civic groups, and orchestrating the efforts of more than 5,000 devoted associate members in 50 states. And we are so pleased to have Dr. Jim Gifford with us here today. Dr. Gifford, thanks so much for being with us. A pleasure to have you here.
I've been looking forward to it.
Tell us a little bit as we get started, for our viewers who may not know Jesse Stuart or much about him. Just who was Jesse Stuart?
Well, Jesse Stuart was arguably the most widely read author of the 20th century. And that probably comes as a surprise to a lot of people. And I'm certainly not suggesting that he was the best writer or the best author, but he was the most widely read because he wrote so much for so many different constituencies.
And he was born in 1906, died in 1984, so he had a lot of opportunity to write and did spend a lot of his years writing. How did you get involved with Jesse Stuart's works, and how did you get involved with the Jesse Stuart Foundation?
My involvement with Jesse Stuart works is, I think, very typical of Americans all around the country. They were introduced to Jesse Stuart by a teacher who was very influenced by Stuart's writings. In this case, it was my grandmother, Clara Moore Clark, who was my 8th grade teacher. She raised me, and she was also my 8th grade teacher at Shelbyville Junior High School in Shelbyville, Tennessee. And every day after lunch, my grandmother read to us in serial fashion from Jesse Stuart books and stories. At the time, I thought that was so that we could rest, but as I've gotten older, I realized that was probably a good opportunity for my grandmother to rest too. But I remember her reading to us The Thread That Runs So True, and it was so dramatic. It was more dramatic than anything I've ever seen on TV or in the movies. It was the sort of thing, the written word really has a way of becoming a part of your heart. And so I was very interested in Jesse Stuart as a young man, as a young boy, really. And I worked my way through all the educational systems and came out yonder side with a PhD in history from the University of Georgia. But I remained interested in Stuart and Appalachia, and my teaching career and administrative career eventually brought me to Morehead State University. I had a position there from 78 to 85, and during that time period I worked with the Jesse Stuart Foundation as it was getting started. And in 1985, it became obvious to the board of directors and to the people who were central to the foundation that it could not succeed without full-time staff. So Morehead State University reassigned me to do that work. And what started out as what we thought might be a 2-year job has turned out to be a 28-year job for me.
That's great. That's great. And I know one thing that happened when you moved to Ashland in 1985, a lot of Stuart's books at that time were out of print, and teachers that were trying to expose their generation of students to Jesse Stuart found that a lot of the books were out of print and unavailable and hard to get. So when you started getting involved with the Jesse Stuart Foundation, what was that process like in terms of trying to get those books made available once again after they started to disappear from print?
Eliot, one of the things that I discovered about the Jesse Stuart Foundation was that it didn't have a very clear mission. I mean, the foundation owned the rights to Stuart's works, but it really wasn't sure what to do. And what I realized almost immediately is that we didn't need to be a museum, or we didn't need to be an educational organization, that our primary objective should be making Stuart's works available to the general public, and more particularly to the educational system. And the way you do that is you get them back in print. And so I gradually began the process of editing and republishing Stuart's out-of-print works. And Stuart wrote 64 books, and so just getting them into print has been a long and exciting and fulfilling opportunity for me.
And I'm so glad you mentioned the 64 books, because, you know, even by today's standards, we think about writers who are writing prolifically like James Patterson and Nora Roberts. I mean, 64 books is still an amazing accomplishment. What are some themes that emerge in a lot of Stuart's books that make him so well loved and make him want to be so well read by not only folks in Kentucky, but people in the Appalachian region? What are some of the things that you've noticed in your work with his texts that you think really resonate with readers even today?
You know, that's such a good question. And it's a question that people articulate in all sorts of ways. And I think the answer is Jesse Stuart was popular when he wrote, and he remains popular today because he wrote about the lives of the people who are reading his books. And it's not necessarily particularly about those people, but he wrote about people that we can all identify with, people that seemed like they might be our neighbors or our grandparents or people we knew in the past. I mean, Stuart had a way of capturing and universalizing the Appalachian experience so that people around America and across the world read his works and identified with them.
And I know that one thing that has happened in addition to you as director being responsible for bringing those books back into print is also sort of a physical location change and moving the Stuart Foundation, Jesse Stuart Foundation, to the former post office building there in Ashland on Winchester Avenue. Where were you all housed before, and why was the decision made to move to that location now?
Well, we started out, our foundation started with high hopes and little money, like a lot of nonprofit organizations. But we started out in an Ashland Oil office building, and we were there for 10 years. And then we moved to another building that was under Ashland Oil control for another 5 years. And by that time, we had succeeded to the point where we had saved a few dollars, and we wanted to have a greater presence in the community. When we were in an office building, we were primarily a mail order business, and I wanted to own a building where we could have a stronger street presence and where people would be comfortable about coming in and shopping and buying books. And so in 1999, late in the year, we purchased the former post office building in the heart of downtown Ashland. It's at the corner of Winchester and 17th Street. And at the time, it seemed like, you know, the greatest real estate deal since the Louisiana Purchase. I mean, at the time, the economy was good, book buying was good. You know, I thought to myself, this is great for us because we'll never outgrow it. But what happened, and of course this is true in everybody's life, nobody knows what's around the corner. You know, what happened was about 8 years after I bought the building, we had terrible decline in our economy. And that combined with a new emphasis in America on electronic books and on the electronic media, it really changed the book buying experience for Americans. And so, simply put, the kind of traditional books that we produce and sell haven't been as popular for several reasons. And our economy declined to the point that this wonderful historic building that we owned, we sold this year. It was just more building than we could afford. And we have purchased another building in Ashland, but we have gone from a 30,000 square foot building to a 10,000 square foot building. And we're doing that so that we can reduce our overhead and ensure our success as an organization. You know, we're not giving up, or we are simply making ourselves more viable for the future.
Okay, excellent. I think we've had a lot of some other publishers and a lot of authors come on that have talked about, you know, the realities of the e-book revelation and the fact that people are turning to that medium now to read, and we don't read as many paper books as we used to. We're reading on screens, we're reading on our phones, we're reading on a tablet, we're reading on an e-reader like a Kindle, and so it has really changed, I think, the way that people are exposed to books, and on the publishing side, the way that publishers handle collecting manuscripts and publishing books today, and we'll talk a bit more about that here in just a minute, about the publishing aspect of the Jesse Stuart Foundation. But I know one thing that you've done so well with the foundation since taking over as director is extending outreach opportunities about the Jesse Stuart Foundation, getting the organization and the foundation exposed out in the community. Can you talk about some of those outreach opportunities that you have, and folks that may be interested in participating in the foundation through those outreach activities and opportunities, what they can expect?
You know, I've been so blessed in doing this work. There are so many hundreds of people who have helped us that we couldn't have a program long enough for me to name them all. I just feel so blessed to have people, such good people, help me. But what we really tried to do is take the books to the public, to make them interesting, to make them a part of people's lives. And so we do a lot of public things. Some of our volunteers, for example, go into schools and make presentations. And then we have a lot of in general public things. We have an open house every year in August that's close to Jesse Stuart's birthday. We have a Jesse Stuart weekend annually at Greenbow Lake State Resort Park, and that's the last weekend in September. We do a lot of book signings. We do a lot of things where we try to engage the general public with books.
That's great. That's terrific. And I know that especially in the fall, you have an event that comes up in September every fall. Tell us a little bit about that event and how folks can get an opportunity to participate through the foundation and get exposed to Jesse Stuart through that event.
The Jesse Stuart Weekend is a wonderful event. It's a lot more like a family homecoming than it is like an academic activity. And I would encourage anyone who's interested in literature to come to the Jesse Stuart Weekend. You will leave having made friends that will be with you for the rest of your life. And there's some really great people that you'll meet. And at the Jesse Stuart Weekend, which this year is September 27th and 28th, it's Friday and Saturday at Greenbow Lake State Resort Park. All of the activities are free, but if people who want to come need to register for a room if they're driving a distance. And I think the number there is 606-473-7324. But they do need to call the Jesse Stuart Lodge at Greenbow Lake State Resort Park and make room reservations. But the other things we do are free and open to the public. We take a bus tour of Stuart's home area on Saturday morning. We do various activities in the afternoon, which include a trip into Ashland to the Jesse Stuart Foundation. We have programs in the evening. Sometimes we have presentations on new books that we publish. Sometimes we have student groups who do dramas based on Stuart's works. But it's a very informal activity, and I have enjoyed inviting friends over the years because I knew if they would come one time, they would want to come back over and over again.
Yeah, it took that first experience to get them hooked,
Right.
and to get them ready. That's terrific. And I know you touched on this a few moments ago about the foundation also being a book publisher and publishing books. Can you talk to us a little bit about the focus for that, and also talk to us a little bit about the kinds of manuscripts that you're looking for, and what's the process like for the foundation when they decide to accept a manuscript? What's the timeline for that leading towards publication?
You know, one of the many corny things I say all the time is that the gestation period for a book is not the same as for a human being. It takes a lot longer for a book to be born. And oftentimes after we accept a manuscript or agree to republish a book that's out of print, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. A lot of books that were published, for example, in the middle of the 20th century, books that Jesse Stuart wrote, or a book like Billy Clark's A Long Row to Hoe, they would use language and make statements that wouldn't be very acceptable in today's social environment. And so, you know, even books that are in print, that were in print at one time, are books that I feel like I need to edit, because the whole purpose of our books is not just to encourage reading, but to be a strong part of the educational system. We want to publish books that promote the educational system at all levels. And so sometimes it might take several years of editing before we design and page up the book. And then at that level, then it becomes predictable. Normally, if a book is ready to go to the printer, it'll probably take about, maybe around 2 months to produce a hardback and 1 month to produce a softback.
Okay, so a lot of the work comes before it goes to the printer. A lot of the behind-the-scenes work, so to speak, is before you get ready to send it to the printer.
Yeah, all of our work takes place before it goes to the printer. After it goes we make the books camera ready. So what we give the printer is what we get back. We do all the design ourselves. We design the pages, we do the illustrations, we design the covers, we do everything. And I think, in all immodesty, we produce some really nice-looking books. And we haven't produced as many books as university presses or commercial presses, but each one I've produced, it's sort of like bringing the baby home from the hospital, you know. I really cradle it and cherish it for a while. But we've produced books by some of Kentucky and Appalachia's great authors: Jesse Stuart, Billy Clark, Thomas Clark, Loyal Jones, Harry Caudle, Alan Eckert, Edwina Pendarvis from here in Huntington, Bob Barnett from here in Huntington. We have, I think we have made available some books to readers that wouldn't have been made available otherwise. They're books that aren't academic enough probably to be published by a university press, and neither would they be quite popular enough to be published by commercial press. Commercial presses are just driven by bean counters. It's all a matter of how many you're going to sell,
Right.
not how great they are.
Absolutely.
So I feel like we have found an important niche in the publishing business, and we produced books that are interesting and important and informative.
And I know you've brought some of those books with you here today to talk about from some authors that maybe our viewers might be familiar with, but I know that you consider these to be some of the best works, or some of the penultimate books that the foundation has produced over the years. So we'll give you an opportunity to take us through the stack here and talk to us a little bit about those books, and we will put those cover images up on the screen as you're talking, so our viewers will have a chance to see those.
As a former teacher, I'll do show and tell.
That would be just fine.
A lot of times when people come into the Jesse Stuart Foundation, some of them are people from the region, you know, and they know what they want. But oftentimes people come into the foundation because they're new to the region, and they say, I really want to know more about this area. What should I read? And I'll show you some books that I suggest to them. Of course, the first book is this book, The Thread That Runs So True, which was the book that got me interested in Jesse Stuart's life. This is in your card catalogs, it would probably be described as a novel, but it is really a thinly disguised autobiographical account of Stuart's one-room school teaching experiences in Greenup County in the early 20th century. And it's great stuff. It's not educational jargon, it is education in a real-life sort of way. And I've had literally dozens of people say to me, this book helped me be a teacher, or this book, helped me survive being a teacher. It was an encouragement. Another great Appalachian book is by Jesse Stuart's second cousin, Billy C. Clark, the great chronicler of the Big Sandy Valley. And Billy Clark probably knew more about river lore than anyone in America except maybe Mark Twain. I mean, if you want to know about river life in Appalachia, you need to read Billy Clark's autobiographical account of his early life, A Long Road to Hoe. And it traces Billy's life from a child who lived in poverty along the Ohio River during great floods to his graduation from high school. And Billy eventually, like Jesse Stuart, went on to be a successful writer and educator. One of the best known books that the Jesse Stuart Foundation has reprinted is Harry Caudle's book, Night Comes to the Cumberlands. When Night Comes to the Cumberlands was published in 1962, it alerted the federal government and the people of America to the economic problems that existed in Appalachia. This book, more than any one thing in history, prompted the federal government to create the Appalachian Regional Commission, which has pumped millions of dollars into Appalachia. Money well spent, money that has helped to strengthen the infrastructure of our region. But, one of the joys of my work is that all of these are people that I've known and worked with.
Sure.
And it's been very satisfying to me. Another very favorite person in my life is Alan Eckert. Alan just died several years ago, and before he died, he had cancer. He knew he was dying. He came to the foundation and spent days signing books so that we would have signed books for his readers long after he passed along. And probably the best and most widely sold of Alan's books is The Frontiersman, which is about the early frontier colonial history of the Ohio River Valley, and features Simon Kenton and Tecumseh. And many of your viewers will have gone to see the outdoor drama at Chillicothe. Mm-hmm. And they may not know this, but Alan wrote that script also. And that script was really an extension of this book, or based on this book. And we have published some not so well-known writers too, like Jim Gifford, who wrote a biography of Jesse Stuart. And I would encourage people who know about Stuart but really don't know as much as they'd like to know to read this book. It's a good and fair, I think, portrayal of Stuart's life and his contributions. And Jesse Stuart accomplished a lot more in his lifetime than people realize. He was a famous author, he was a famous educator, he was a far-sighted conservationist, and he was a great spokesman for the people of Appalachia and his eastern Kentucky homeland.
As we finish up with you, Dr. Gifford, we thank you so much for sharing those books with us. What do you think Jesse Stuart would think today about us? You know, as we mentioned, he died in 1984, 30 years ago. What do you think he would think of us today, making such a fuss over him? If he were alive today, what do you think he would say? Would he be glad that we're carrying some of his works forward, or would he think we're making a fuss over nothing? Or how do you think he would respond to what we're doing with his works and on his behalf today with the foundation?
Well, in all honesty, Stuart had an enormous ego, and he would have thought that he was very deserving of all of this attention, and he was. Yeah. And he was very deserving of the attention. He was a hard worker, and as I said, he made contribution in a lot of ways, but he was never bashful about accepting praise. And you know, that's not surprising, Eliot, because a person who writes his own autobiography has to have a feeling that he or she is important.
Yeah, absolutely. In our final moments with you, Jim, as we wrap up this episode of Chapters, if some of our audience is interested in getting in touch with you, you mentioned the location of the Jesse Stuart Foundation earlier, but if they'd like to contact you, if they'd like to find out more about the foundation, find out more about the books that the foundation has published or upcoming books that the foundation is going to publish, how can they get in touch with you or get in touch with the foundation?
We'd love for people to walk in our doors. You know, we're at the corner, we're in Ashland, Kentucky, at the corner of Winchester and 17th Street in downtown Ashland. We're open 9 to 5 every day. We'd love for people to come in and see our facility. We have 2 bookstores, a used bookstore and a new bookstore, an art gallery. It's a good visit, you know, for folks in this area who haven't been to the Jesse Stuart Foundation. You need to put that on your things to do list.
Terrific, terrific. Dr. Jim Gifford, the director of the Jesse Stuart Foundation, we appreciate you joining us here on Chapters today and telling us a little more about the Jesse Stuart Foundation and bringing some works to share with us and our viewers. We appreciate it so much. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And we also want to say a special thanks to the staff and management at Empire Books and News here at Pullman Square in Huntington for providing our studio taping space today. And we encourage you to stop by Empire Books and News for all your reading needs. And we'd like to remind you that they have the largest selection of magazines in the tri-state. And many of the authors that you have seen featured here on Chapters have their works for sale. Many of the publishers and editors that you've seen featured on our show have their works for sale here at Empire Books and News. So whatever your reading interests or tastes may be, talk to Charlotte and her staff down at Empire Books and News, and they'll be sure to get you the books that you need for your reading tastes and to satisfy those reading desires here at Pullman Square. And we appreciate them providing our studio taping space today. We'd also like to remind you, if you have a question, comment, or story suggestion about this Chapters program or any Chapters program that you've seen here on Armstrong Cable, we'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email to the address that you see right here at the bottom of the screen, lp4@zoominternet.net. We appreciate all the comments and feedback that we get to the show, so please keep those comments coming. And if you want to watch previous episodes of Chapters or other programming that you've seen here on Armstrong Cable, you can check out the Armstrong One Wire YouTube page. All you have to do is go to www.youtube.com. In the search field, type Armstrong One Wire, and there you can find all the previous programs that have appeared here on Armstrong Cable, including all the previous episodes of Chapters. So if you missed a certain episode or you want to go back and rewatch another episode that you've previously seen, we encourage you to check out the Armstrong One Wire YouTube page for those episodes. And that's going to do it for us this time on Chapters. Please come again next time, and in the meantime, stay tuned to this station for news and views that impact you and your community.